Morning, everybody. So I finally finished my platform so I can come outside from the heat of the greenhouse. So hopefully everybody is having a wonderful morning and you're ready to get started with a workout. So let's go ahead and start out with no equipment. We just want our hands, our feet, and a nice solid floor beneath you. So what I want you to do is let's start out by doing our marching action. So we're going to get some blood pumping. We don't want those toes dragging down towards the floor. We want to pick the toes up, angling them up towards your face every time you step, driving length down through the middle of your knees, driving your hips forward with each step without going anywhere, using your ribs to anchor down in the front and the back of the neck to pull away from the ears to activate all of this nice core. So let's go ahead and add some arms into it, and let's go forward, side, out. If you mess up your pattern, it's okay. Just come back to it. And let's really focus on the shoulders and the ribs staying anchored here. Lifting through the back of the neck to make sure that chin isn't lifting you out of the connection you're trying to make with those ribs. Good. Keep pulling those toes up. Keep the knees loose and wide at the top, but let the feet come nice and centered as you touch the ground. And let's go ahead and let your arms rest. And what we're going to do in the beginning today is a little bit of work to release the foot. But I want to be able to give you something to assess off of so that you can decide, did it work, right? So let's go ahead and do something. You can use those marches. That's one assessment because you were just using your feet. But let's go ahead and try something a little bit more challenging. And that one is a little bit of a jumping jack action. Your arms are free to do whatever you'd like. They can go forward and up as long as the shoulders and ribs stay anchored through whatever action you choose. So when we're doing that jumping jack action, I just want to feel what your feet, I want you to feel, I can't feel. I want you to feel what are your feet and calves and ankles feeling during this set so that you can really give a good, honest assessment when we do it again after what I have planned. So let's go ahead and do a little bit of out and ins. Your arms can go elbows reaching towards the ground, or you could do fingers reaching towards the floor as they're reaching out. Just make sure that you're really keeping those ribs anchored and keeping your weight in the middle of the ball of your foot and not into anything that's feeling like it's backwards. And so now rest and just make an assessment of what that felt like in your feet. If your calves were really burning by the end, hopefully you'll feel the next set is a little bit better. So what we're going to do first is we're just going to start out with some rolling. So I want you to grab your lacrosse ball. You could use your MYT-ROLLER if you have a MYT-ROLLER. You could use a golf ball. Golf balls would work. Just make sure it's not on a really slippery surface where it might end up slipping out from under your foot more than you want it to. But we're going to spend a minute or so on each foot. If you're using the MYT-ROLLER, you want to use the brown or the wooden ball at the end of the stick. If you're using a lacrosse ball, then make sure that whatever part of your foot that's not on the ball is on the ground. And that is because of balance. If your foot is off the ground and you're pressing into the ball, you're going to hold a little tension in the middle of your thigh, which I don't want, but also your balance isn't going to be as good. You're not going to be able to put as much weight into the ball as I want you to if you're checking your balance. So I'd also say that if you're new to this and your balance isn't so great, or if you've been doing it a long time and your balance isn't so great, hold on to something. Use a chair, use a counter, do something to make sure that balance isn't coming into question, because that's where silly things happen and grip and don't allow you to get the full effect of this exercise. So let's go ahead and we're going to switch to the other foot. I'm going to use the MYT-ROLLER for this set. If you're using the MYT-ROLLER, I would tell you to put the balls facing the outside so they're not a trip hazard or they're not getting in the way as you're doing this one. You want to make sure that with each pressure that you put on the ball, that you're driving your hip slightly forward and you're never staying back on the back leg doing tension like this. You have to dance those hips forward. Essentially, you have to put weight into this leg. There has to be a transfer of weight. If your weight's all on the back leg, you're not going to be able to get much effect from this. And yeah, it might not hurt as bad, but sometimes a little bit of pain is a good thing, because pain is something that we're going to live with whether we want to or not. We have to learn, is it bad pain? Is it really a risk? Or is it, this just hurts a little bit. It's not a risk. It's just something I got to do to make a better thing happen. And so we want to make sure that we're able to deal with some discomfort in this ball rolling and releasing our body around it, having that relationship get built with our pain to say, okay, this hurts, but it's not really endangering me, so it's not awful. So let's go ahead and now switch to the other foot. And whether you're using the mighty rollers, a golf ball, whatever, this time I want you to step your heel onto the ball, put the ball of your foot onto the ground, and you're just gonna put weight into that foot that's on the ball. And really focus on the knee being straight, the hip being straight. I like to keep my opposite foot forward on this one so that as I rock back into it, I can decide how much weight I want to put onto that ball, because it's tender back in your heel if you're like me. And not everybody is as tender as others, but when we're finding tenderness, we need to take that time there and kind of give it a little bit of patience, give it a little bit of release, tell it it's okay, but we don't want it to be holding all that tension, so we need to release it away. So let's do about 1 or 2 more spots on this heel, and then we're going to switch to the other. Man, it's so much nicer being outside than it was in the greenhouse. And again, I love the greenhouse for a lot of different things, but hot days in the summer are not one of them. So let's go ahead and switch to the other foot. I'm going to do the lacrosse ball just to make sure that I give the option on the heel. And when you're on the lacrosse ball, again, make sure you've got the ball of your other foot on the ground so that you can decide how much weight you want to put into the ball without worrying about balance as you're working through it. And I will say that it's much more tender with the wooden ball than it is the lacrosse ball. I also find that the wooden ball gives me the ability to not have to be in my toes so much. Balance is less of a factor with the mighty rollers, but either one will do the trick. I think a golf ball would probably be great too. Just make sure that you're judging how much weight you're putting down into the surface so you can really release around it. You don't just want to press into something and make it hurt so bad that your body has a negative reaction to it. We want to find that positive pain. Good. All right, so let's go ahead and put your ball or your mighty roller off to the side. And let's do a little bit of beast and saw plank. These are another 2 exercises that do a great job of releasing tension in the feet, getting them to stretch out a little bit, getting the rest of our body to activate, so therefore we can get our feet, ankles to deactivate and release. So let's start the first one in an elbow plank, and we're going to do a saw plank. And when we're doing the saw plank, it's important that as you're doing this action, because this is kind of what the plank will look like on the ground, when you're doing this action, we want to make sure that as you come down, you're not, or as you go into your heels, you're not letting your butt go up and down. We want to really maintain nice length through our hips, our knees, and really protect that posture. And if you find yourself swaying or bending uncontrollably that you can't handle, then pull something in, find something a little higher, and use something to make this a successful exercise. So if you need to do it from a counter or a coffee table or a step, that is your position on this one. If you're going to do it from the floor, make sure that you're honest with yourself and your movements. If anything causes you stress and pain, then we need to reassess where you go from. But if it feels strong and it's activating and you feel things loosening and tightening where they should, then stay on the floor. So as we get down on the floor and we get into our plank position, I want you to put your elbows down with your hands straight forward, palms flat on the floor. We want our butt to, let's just do a couple rocks here. So you're gonna just round, it's like a cat-cow in yoga, but we're just in a different position. You're not trying to stretch a big curve in your spine in either direction. You're just trying to release your spine. Look down as you look through your knees, pushing your belly button up towards the sky. Look up as you stick your butt up in the air and let your belly fall. And just kind of loosely move between that action a little bit here. And so what I want you to do is finish in the one where you're looking up and your butt's tipped up a little bit. Now, I want you to bring your head down to look between your elbows, and that puts your head in a nice neutral position. And now before we step out into the plank, I want you to really push your elbows into the floor and push your shoulders away from your elbows and away from your ears simultaneously. You should feel that you go from kind of a sloppy position to a nice, tight, energized position. So let's go ahead and sloppy, get into a nice drop, and then now I want you to do it again where you push your elbows into the floor, you drive your shoulders away from your ears, and now let's step into our elbow plank. If you've got a mat that needs to stretch out, do it here so you're not sliding more than you're moving back and forth. And so now we're gonna just push into our toes and our knuckles, and then we're just gonna bounce forward. And then we're going to drive our shoulders away from our ears as we rock into our toes. And now just work that saw back and forth, keeping your hips straight, keeping the back of your neck and your chin pushing away from the floor at all times, making sure that you're not sagging in between your shoulder blades. And now let's go ahead and rest your knees down and stick your butt up and look up. Give yourself that nice upward position. And now let's back out of that elbow position and sit onto your feet or onto a block or onto the ground. And while we're on the ground, actually, let's go ahead and come off of your feet, get into this position. I'm going to come forward just a little bit. And what we're going to do is a little shin box. We've been doing this the last few weeks, so for those of you who do it all the time, this is just a little assessment we use. You're going to start into it by knees stacked, feet stacked, and then bring your bottom leg forward and your top leg back so that your toe is even with your knee and your foot is flat on your thigh. And so you may look like this, and that's quite all right, but you just want to assess what's feeling like blocking you today. And if you try to sit up, if it feels like you're bending right here, then don't try and sit up anymore. Just relax into that arm. It's not worth trying to put a kink in your back to try and see if you can get up taller. I just want to see if you feel even on your pelvis, what's the tallest position you can come without feeling like you're kinked at the side trying to reach to get over there. And so let's go ahead and switch to the other side. We're just going to swing our feet around, turn our hips the other way, stack our knees and our feet up, and then slide the bottom leg back. Oops, I lie. Slide the bottom leg forward and the top leg back, and find that flat foot position on your toe. And I'm just gonna slide over so I'm a little bit more in frame. And so when you're doing this one, again, make sure that you're just using it as assessment. How do the two sides compare? Don't get locked up into the goal of being, can I sit tall? The goal is to feel. Just take a second, be present with your body, and really feel what is kind of blocking you, or what does this shin box feel like. And so just so you remember for next time, this would be your left shin box because your left foot is forward. You may have tightness in your right hip, but it's in your left shin box that you have that tightness. So if you're trying to keep track, then that's a good way for you to assess next time when your left leg is forward. How does that stack up? All right, so let's do a beast, another toe mobilizer and core activator. And so let's get into our hands and knees again. You want your knees pretty wide on your mat, definitely wider than your hips. And you can see between my legs there's a bit of an A position. I call it your A-frame position. And I want to make sure that when I lift one leg, let's see, I'm going to lift this one. When I lift one leg, it's really important that I maintain that A-frame position on that leg and I don't end up coming over or sliding out of that. So a good mental image for this is to draw an imaginary line, sometimes even drawing a physical one with your fingers on the mat, and really assess where is your belly button and pubic bone located on that mat. You want it to maintain that position, so when you lift, if you notice that your belly button, your pubic bone are over on the side, then we need to change and we need to address that. And we need to make sure we don't go so long and high with our foot. Maybe we have to keep it on the ground, but just remember, even if it's on the ground, the heel has to be driving the energy away. Don't get caught into your toe and using that ground to be a destructive force to your progressions. So, all right, let's go ahead and start with your toes tucked under. They need to be part of this. Do not have your feet flat on the ground. Tuck your toes under. Find that wide A-frame position. Push your shoulders away from your hands. And let's go ahead and reach one arm, making a fist, and reach one heel long away without drifting away from that middle position on your mat. And now pull your shoulder away from the fist. Push your neck and shoulders away from the mat. Reach through that knee and heel to drive energy through your body. You should feel this in your abs. You should feel this in your arms. You should feel this in your lats. You should feel this in every muscle in your body if you're doing it correctly. So let's go ahead and bring it down. If you felt that in your back predominantly, then my first thing would say, don't lift your leg so high and work on the length coming out of your knee rather than the height of your leg. And also watch your A-frame position. That's probably your culprit. So let's go ahead and we're gonna do the other side. So make sure your toes are tucked. Let's go ahead and lift that arm and leg, making a fist with the lifting arm, driving your heel through the leg that's reaching long. Push your neck and your shoulders and your chest away from the mat. Keep that hip long, keep that knee long as you reach through your heel. Pull the shoulder away from the fist you're making in that hand, and keep that energy as you hold for 3, 2, and rest everything down. And I know I said we were going to do a beast, but I sure did do a bird dog with you guys, which is great. And we'll definitely be able to make use out of that. But now we're going to do our beast set, okay? So when we're doing the beast set, if you need a break here before we go into it, please take it. Sit to your side. I'm going to grab a quick drink of water and just take a second and let your arms recover. Make sure you're not resting with your weight resting on your shoulders right now. Really stay recovered in your arms in between these sets so that you're not wearing into your shoulders and necks when you don't want to. All right, so let's go ahead and do our beast. Use something on your back, whether it's a block, a ball. I prefer a block over a ball just because the ball is more set to stay in the cave of your back, but the block really gives you a better test of your abilities. So just to give clarification to terminology, if the block is in this position on your back, it's in the first position. This would be second position. That would be third position. So I don't care what position you use it in, just use the block. Feel it. Even if it's in the first position, you're gonna feel the wobble, even though it might not fall off your back. So your job is to keep the wobble from happening. And that way you'll be able to progress to level 2 before you know it. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our toes tucked under. Put your block on your back in whatever position that you're going to use. Hopefully the breeze doesn't knock mine over. I have an excuse now. And what I want you to do is just float off your knees, push your shoulders away from your hands, push your neck and chin away from the floor. And if you're new to this, just stay there practicing relaxing your knees and your toes without letting your knees drop to the floor. If you've been doing this a while, work on doing some crawls. Make sure that each crawl is only a millimeter of movement at a time in your brain, because the bigger you step, the more your butt will hop, and therefore your block will shift. Your job is to keep that block still and to avoid wobbles. And that way you'll be working your abs more than your knees. And let's go ahead and rest down. Kept it. And so if your block was falling all over the place, or it fell off within 5 seconds of you being up, then lower the block into a different position. If you felt like you lost it right at the last second, you're on the right path. Keep that block all day long. You need to challenge yourself to do the hardest thing you do well. So we don't want to make it too easy by saying, let me just do one position for the rest of the week. Keep challenging yourself. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to reassess that jumping jacks action. That thing that we did first off. So I want you to slowly come back up to your feet. Grab a little drink of water if you didn't before. Walk around just a second. Let things move and reacclimate. And we're just going to do a quick 20-second set of those jumping jacks. And all I want you to do is assess before and after. Assess what they felt like the first time around. Were your calves tight? Were where your feet tense. And then this time, hopefully they feel much looser and you feel activated through your posture. So let's go ahead and do a few. Elbows can be bent, arms can be long, whichever one you prefer. Just make sure the shoulders and ribs stay anchored. So let's go ahead, and I want you to imagine that you're on hot coals and you're just trying to pop, pop, pop right off those hot coals. Focus on your ribs and shoulders anchoring with each contact in the floor, reaching the elbows towards the floor as you move them, or reaching the fingers towards the floor as you move them, and then relax. So hopefully you felt that your body was much more prepared for that second set than it was the first set. And that goes to say that we need to activate. We need to get our bodies ready for life. And when we sit too long at work, or we've been rehabbing ourselves and we've gotten weak, we need to really make sure that we're pushing ourselves past those initial discomforts to say stop, and instead pushing us to do smart ways of moving better, so therefore you teach your body that it can feel better. So let's go on to a little bit of marching with your weights. So now I'd like you to pick something that's a little heavier. We're going to hold it down at our sides, so it's nothing that you're going to be having to put up overhead. So let's go ahead and pick whatever weights you're going to use. Make sure you pick them up safely. And let's go ahead and march in place. Pulling the toes up as you lift, driving length to the knee and the hip as you push into the floor each time. Using the back of your neck to reach away from your shoulders. And your hands are strong grip on those bells with your knuckles reaching towards the floor. We want to make sure to keep that energy driving through our arms, keeping the chest open, keeping the posture engaged. 3, 2, and now let's go ahead and rest. And we're going to put the weight down. And I want you to find a counter or something that you can pull on or hold on. I'm going to use my post over here. I'll show you what you're going to do, and then you can decide if you have something like that in your area. If not, then you're just going to do a regular squat and come back up, imagining your butt crack opening, imagining your hips opening with each push back of your hips. But don't worry about holding on to something if you don't have it handy. So, get a good grip on whatever you've got. Keep your weight centered to the middle of your hands. And then stick your butt out almost like a beast. And push your knees wide and reach your neck long and just settle down as low as your hips will let you go. If you want to go lower, you need to think wider. You don't want to pinch. If your feet are coming off the ground or your knees are pinching in, go ahead and everybody push back up away from the floor with your hips. So I want you to go as low as you can go, but I want you to also feel this time, where is the limit? What is safe? What should you just kind of say, all right, well, this is where I go today. And each time you do it, you might go a little lower as you get better. But I want you to focus that your heels, your toes, nothing lifts off the ground as you're going into your squat. I also don't want your knees sliding forward as you're going into your squat. And lastly, make sure that as you're going into your squat, that you're not either reaching out of it completely, or you're not finding yourself like curled up like this. If your back is in a flex position, then that's not what we want, okay? We need to think neutral spine. We need everything here to be feeling good. At the very bottom, we can let our butt sink a little bit, but we don't want to go into it rounded. So let's go ahead and try another one. Feet nice and wide in your squat. Hands centered in front of you. Holding on about at your belly button. And guys, make sure that you're close to whatever you're holding. If you're starting too far, that's going to dupe you into a rounded back. So get as close to you as you can to the thing that you're holding with your hands about at your belly button. And then reach your hips open and wide, pushing your knees as wide as they can go as you settle into the lowest position that feels comfortable. If you've got something like I do, a pole, you can lower your hands a little bit here. Make sure your shoulders are down away from your ears and you're pushing those knees as wide as you can without losing any contact of your foot on the ground. All right, so now When we go to get up, we want to push our hips away from the ground, and we want to think wide through our knees. So as you come up, push wide and come on up. Beautiful. Now, we're going to do another marching set next. This time our weights are going to be in a 90-degree position in front of us. So as you're marching this time, I want you to make sure that you pick a weight that you can control there. If you have bracelets or watches or anything on your wrists here, you may want to change the position or take them off so you're not having that hurt your wrists. If you're doing the bottoms up position, I would still make sure that your wrists are free, so if you do lose it and it bangs down, it doesn't cause you or your jewelry any damage. So let's go ahead, find what weights you're going to use for this set. Bring them up into our clean position first. And now we're going to float the elbows up in front of us. We want a nice strong wrist, no buckled here, no rounded there. And we want to keep that strong wrist as we march, focusing on balancing the weight with our elbows right underneath our hands. Keep the ribs anchored. Make sure that your weight is not causing you to lean back. We want to keep the weight in that position, but if you need to lower your hands slightly to keep it out of your shoulders and to keep you from doing anything negative, then lower it slightly. Keep the hands in a parallel position. Try not to be here, definitely not there. We want parallel as we pull our toes up. 3, 2, and now let's go ahead and set the weights down nice and safe. And we're going to go back to that squat action of opening up your hips. And so instead of holding on to the bar this time, we're going to use your bands. And what we're going to do with the bands is you're going to do a kickstand. And when you're in that kickstand, I want you to use the band around your elbows, not on your elbows, but right below your elbows. And when we're doing this kickstand, you have two choices. You can either tap your foot in one place, as long as that tap is close behind your other foot. A tap back here will do nothing but mess up your posture because you'll be in your heel. So let's find a nice squat, pushing the elbows away from each other. Slide to one side. You can tap, our first option, or you can do a little diagonal tap where you still remain light on that ice, but you get a little bit of diagonal movement of the knee. And I want you to make sure you're keeping that moving knee face forward. We don't want it to turn out. That'll put your pelvis in a different position. Good, keep the back of your neck pushing away from the band. Keep your ribs anchored like that my hand were in front of me, you're trying to push away from it. And now let's go ahead and come on up. Let your arms out of the band for a second. Shake them out. If you want a little drink of water, grab it. And when we go to the other side, really focus when you go into your squat that there's no slide forward of the knees. We find a nice healthy squat to start. All right, band back on your elbow area. Push it a little wide, drop into your squat. Find the other leg. And now give me some tap in places or some little diagonal taps. But make sure that diagonal tap doesn't take you into anything that creates that movement. We want to pretend that that back foot's on a really thin piece of ice. Now make it even thinner. And make sure that the back of your neck is reaching away from the band so that you can keep your counterbalance of your butt pushing back without losing it. Hold it. 3, 2, and go ahead and come on up. Take a break with your band. All right, so with our march set this time, we're going to bring our arms way overhead as we march. I want the palms facing forward as you're marching. So it's like you were giving somebody a high five, but make sure as you give that high five, nothing pops up through the ribs, nothing pops up through the shoulders. We stay nice and anchored with our arms. And when you're going up into your hold, if you find the straightness of your elbows, the goal is to have a locked elbow. But if that goal pulls me into a destructive cheat, then I don't want that to be how high you go. We have to start feeling, what is our lat and ab connected? What can we drive length out of the arm through without pulling and sacrificing the rest of the body? So find a light weight. That's the best way to go after this one and have success. Start light and move yourself up rather quickly. If you can get your arm straight with whatever weight you chose, try to go a little higher next time. Because we always want to keep challenging what we can do, because if we stay at a light weight, it can be destructive to our progression. All right, so let's find that weight. You could do, if you have light kettlebells, you could do a bottoms up position, which would be where the bell is facing upward. But for this one, I'm going to do it in a normal position when it's up in the air. All right, so let's go ahead and bring your weights up to that nice clean position with your wrists nice and strong. Yes, it's uncomfortable on the bell, but suck it up, buttercup. You got to get through this part so you can get stronger. And if a little bell weight causes you to buckle under its pressure, then that's going to dupe you from the returns you want to see out of this workout. So let's go ahead and press your arms up to that marching position, high five, ribs anchored, trying to get your biceps by your ears, but it's more important to keep your ribs and lats anchored. Keep driving your knuckles of your middle fingers up to the ceiling or sky as your shoulders and ribs anchor towards the floor. Keep driving length through the legs. If you need to drop down to this position at any point, you can. You can also try to go back up. 3, 2, and bring the weights down here. Bring the weights down to your hips and then set them down with good form. Beautiful. All right, so our next one is going to be the butt reaches with the band on your hands. So I want for this one you to find a wall, a chair. I'm going to use a chair just because walls are in shortage on my porch. But if I have this chair, and you know what, I'm going to put it in this position. So we're going to act like that's my wall, okay? And I want to do a squat with the intention of trying to tap the bottom of my butt to the chair without any weight falling back into my heel or making me feel like I lose my control. So you're going to challenge yourself to messing up on this one, okay? So don't think about trying to stay safe. Stay safe in the beginning and then challenge yourself to see what you can do. So let's see, how far can you stand away from the chair that you can reach your butt back and tap it. Oh, I got it. So I'm going to take a little baby step forward. And now as I go for that reach again, the back of my neck is going to be trying to reach away from the point I'm trying to touch in that direction, so that I'm using the length of my spine to counteract or counterbalance my hips going back. So as we go for our next one, reach your butt bone back, trying to spread your hips as wide as possible as you're keeping contact with your foot on the ground. You do not want to go so wide that your toes fall off the ground. We want to really send the hips back and knees wide, but keep our feet solidly on the floor without feeling our toes want to peek up. So let's go ahead and try 2 more of those. Find your furthest distance and then challenge it with another centimeter. Keep trying to reach the hips back as you reach the back of your head forward. If it causes pain or it causes your hip to hurt, relax for a second. We're going to try something a little different. And that's not just for the people who are hurting. What I want you to see is that sometimes weight can do helpful things. So what we're going to do is I'm going to pick, actually, let's see, we're going to do a little experiment. I don't get to do this too much on the Instagram classes, but let's go ahead and do a little experiment. Our first one, we're going to use the band on our elbows, or near our elbows, not actually on them. The second set we're going to do with a kettlebell. And then you're going to tell yourself, because you can't tell me, you can always feel free to reach out to me later and tell me, but you can tell yourself which was the best set. Was it the one with nothing? Was it the one with the band? Was it the one with the weight, right? So let's go ahead and try it. So put the band around that point right below your elbows if your hands are pointing to the ground. And now let's go ahead, and every time you go to sit your hips back, I want you to push your elbows down towards the floor as you push tension into the band. I also want you to lengthen the back of your neck rather than looking up, okay? So just resist the look up and really feel the length. I don't want you bending it down either, so just find the length without looking up. And so let's go ahead and find that position that you were at before. And now reach the hips back as you tighten up your band and find what is that position. And does the position change? It might not actually move you further out, but how does it feel in your balance? Did you feel before you kept kind of falling backwards? Were your hips tighter? So by putting the elbow tension on there, what does that do to the movement for you, right? So that's your assessment on the band. So now let's do it with a weight. And for the weight, this is a challenge for me to say. I want you to challenge yourself and pick a weight that's pretty stressful. But I don't want that weight you're gonna be in a bent position. So I wanna make sure that you have the strength to support that heavier weight. So whatever weight you feel when we do these exercises where you hold it and we do maybe the kickstand or we do squats with, that's about the weight I want you to do here. Don't challenge yourself too much beyond that. And so when you pick up your weight, let's bring it up to our chin. If you have a dumbbell, hold it on either end of the dumbbell and keep it up by your chin. And so let's do the same thing. Make sure that the elbows are always reaching towards the floor or back towards your butt when you're doing this exercise so that you don't let the weight fall forward. You want your elbows really reaching down past your hips through this action. So let's go ahead and find your position. Drive your hips back, reach your head forward, and challenge yourself with a couple movements to see, can you go further out? Does it free up your hips a little bit more? And even if you don't move, does it make it feel looser, easier? So go ahead and put that weight down. And hopefully you assessed something. Guaranteed they would be different, but they may be different for everybody in the terms of the band should activate a little bit, so it probably would have been better than the no hands, but the weight really was able to kind of anchor into these, allowing you to focus on the release and the opening of your hips a little bit more. So that's why a little weight can do some really positive things for us every once in a while. All right, so now let's go ahead, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna do our slide set where we're going down and we're going up, and then we're gonna do a plank set. So that's kind of what we're gonna do a mixture of. We're gonna do a few rounds of this type of action, the lateral lunge. We're going to do a few of those, and then, like I said, we'll go into a plank. So we're gonna mix up your bending and your straightening. We wanna make sure that we're not always flexing into a squat, because that can kind of put a lot of stress into things if we overdo it. So by working the plank, we kind of answer the squat with something that is strong to defend any of those nasty little things from coming in. So let's go ahead, and for our first set, let's go ahead and use the band on your arms. So we've been using this position quite a lot today, so it's the same one right below those elbows. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna start with your feet nice and wide. And let's see, I think you can, let me turn this and see if that kind of gives you a better. There we go. So what I'd like is your elbows in the band. I want your feet wide, and typically when I say wide feet, people do this. So if that's what you did, give me even wider. I want you to test your abilities to get wide, but also stay forward in your feet, meaning forward and not feeling like you're falling backwards. If you feel like you're falling backwards, then bring your feet in a little bit more. Find that push of the hips. Find that straightness through the A-frame position, and then worry about going a little wider. All right, so what we're gonna do, push width into the elbows, drive the elbows towards the floor, and then send your butt back as you reach your head forward. And then I want you to come back up. You can release your tension a little bit in your arms. And as you go to the other side, sending your hip back, you're straightening your other leg. Driving the elbows out and down towards the floor or towards your knees might be another good reference of those elbows driving towards something. And now let's go ahead and come up, releasing tension. We're gonna do 2 more on each side. So make sure that you're really driving the hips back as you go into that squat, straightening out the one leg, driving through the elbows, and coming up away from the ground by pushing your hips away. And then push your hips back as your ribs stay pushed away from the ground. The back of your neck stays lengthened and pushing away from the floor. And then come back up, let the tension go. Take your hands out of the band for a second. Good. Roll your shoulders, rest them. And we're gonna do on our next set, we're gonna go for a little weight. And with the weight, I might say to go, if you felt like that last set where we were holding it here was too heavy or too light, then this is the same position and roughly a similar hip position. So whatever you used last time, choose accordingly, either heavier or lighter, depending on what you want to do. And let's go ahead and we're going to do the same setup of legs nice and wide. Good. You know what? We have to do our plank set. I almost went right back into that. I apologize. So let's go ahead and safely set that weight down to the side. We're going to do our plank set in between these, again, just to break up that hip bending. And when we go into this plank, you can use the floor. You can also use a chair. You can use the steps. You can use a counter. But let's go ahead and use an elbow plank position. And if you're on a counter, you may want to get a towel or a mat or something to put underneath that edge, because that can get kind of painful on a sharp edge. And so for our first set, we're just going to get into a plank and we're going to work on touching our hand to our chest. If you can't think about touching your hand to your chest, then you're just going to think about going light on the other elbow while you're trying to push through the working arm. And so let's go ahead. I'm going to show a demo on the chair the first set, and then I'll move down to the mat. But make sure that your shoulders always are pushing down away from the elbows and away from the ears. You step both feet out, and then you want to push through the elbow that you're on to offset the lift that you need to do on the other arm. Make sure that your hips stay long, and the lifting elbow, that hip, so my right hip now has to stay tall and my knee needs to stay long. If the lifting arm leg bends, you're gonna get a twist and it's not gonna feel so strong on this. So let's go ahead and rest. And so you need to assess wherever you did it, whether you did it from the floor, the chair, the counter, assess whether you were able to keep that hip strong. Did you feel that you were buckling up? And a lot of times you can't feel it, guys. So I'm not going to say that just because you didn't feel it, it didn't happen. But just make sure on this next one, when we get to our next plank after our set of bends, that you don't feel when you lift an arm, the hip twist out. You want to feel when you lift the arm, it's almost like your hip charges and your knee lengthens into that long position, because when it bends a little bit, it pulls tension, which then causes you to rotate. So just make sure that that's what we're feeling, and I'll remind you when we get to the next one. All right, so let's go ahead and find that weight that you had picked for your next sliding drill. And this exercise is the exact same as the last one we did with those wide legs, except you're not going to come up tall each time. You're going to stay low. And so what I want you to imagine is that once we go into our slide down to that one side, some contractor comes in and just builds a shelf right over top of your head. I don't know how he did that. but he builds a shelf right over top of your head when you're down there. And from then on, you're not allowed to come up over top of that shelf. You've got to stay low so you don't hit your head on it, okay? So let's go ahead and bring the weight up to your chin. Find your feet into that wide position with the hips charging forward, but the ribs and shoulders anchored down. Drive length out of one hip as you send the other butt cheek back, keeping the weight high, because if it falls down, it's going to break you down. And now, the contractor just came in, and now I want you to slide across to the other position without touching the shelf that he just built above you. Make sure that your hips are reaching back and pushing back as you slide through. Don't let your knees touch the imaginary chair right in front of them. Keep your ribs pushing away from the bell. Keep your shoulders away from your ears. Keep your elbows reaching towards the floor out to the side. 3, 2, and he came and took the shelf away. Drop your weight, come on up tall, and take a little rest. Nice. Okay, so we're going into another plank set. And this plank set we're going to do from the floor. And this time we're going to do it from your from your long arm. And there's a lot of people who don't believe in a long arm plank or push-up. I'm not one of them. I think that elbow planks are probably better. But being able to change and be able to have a lot of patterns is something that we need in life. And so I prefer, for certain things, when people are learning them, to do that from the straight arm, because that pushing feeling of a long arm comes a little bit more naturally to people than this pushing of an elbow. So it's use them interchangeably. So we're going to do our middle set of this sequence with the straight arms on the floor. You can do straight arms on the chair or whatever prop you're using to do your elevated planks. So when we get down onto the ground or wherever you're going to do them, make sure that your hands are facing forward. Your shoulders push away from the ground. The back of your neck pushes away from the ground. And what I want, when you step your feet out, we want to really find the length in our hips, the length in our knees, but never sacrificing the push away from the ground with our ribs. Because if we lose this, then our butt becomes a sag on our back and it starts to sway. So let's really keep that energy driving through the front of our body. If you start feeling it in the back of your back or the back of your body, raise your hips up just a little bit higher. All right, so let's go ahead, push into the floor. Step your legs out nice and wide so it helps you with your balance when you're lifting one arm. And if you can, push through one arm and lift the other one. Make sure your hip doesn't lift on the lifting arm. Make sure that hip stays planted in its spot, lengthening through the knee, reaching the heel back towards the wall behind you, pushing the neck and the ribs away from the floor, making sure that you're driving that shoulder blade away from the floor as far as possible. And there's minimal shift side to side because your pubic bone and your belly button are staying in the same position. And let's go ahead and bend your knees, stick your butt out, and slowly sit back and rest for a second. We are going to come back up to your feet, and we're going to do our sliding hip movement. And this time I want you to use either the kettlebell you used last time, that's fine, or if you want to challenge yourself after you've warmed up on that last one, you want to go a little higher, then let's go ahead and pick what weight you want to do. Good form picking up the weight, whatever you choose. And let's go ahead and bring the weight up. Slide your feet out as wide as they can comfortably go. Engage your posture. Push your hips back as you lengthen one leg. The contractor came, he built his shelf. Now slide to the other side, releasing the knees as you slide across, lengthening through the middle of that knee that lengthens, driving through the back of the neck away from the shoulders, keeping the weight close to your body so that it doesn't become a drag on your back, and never letting your knees sneak forward so that you are hitting the chair that would be in front of you. Keep your toes loose on the floor. Make sure they're not lifting or scrunching. And let's go ahead one more time across. Contractor came, drop the weight, come up on past your shelf. Good, go ahead and relax, stand tall, move your weight out of the way, and let's go ahead and slowly work into our plank set. And so with the plank set, I want you to go to your elbows this time if you can take it. If your elbows are too much of a challenge and you need to either go up higher on a chair, or if you'd like to try the straight arm approach, that's okay too. So let's go ahead, find your way into your hands and knees. Go ahead and place your hands and knees. And let's go ahead and straighten out your legs, send them into a nice wide position, lengthen the back of your neck as you push it away from the floor. And then let's go ahead and lift one hand. See if you can hold it. If you can't, put the hand back down. Push through that hand as you lift the other hand. Make sure the lifting hand lengthens through that hip and knee. Switch one more time each side, really lengthening that lifting arm, hip. Don't let it drop. Keep the energy through the front of your body. And then let's go ahead and bend your knees, stick your butt up in the air, and sit back and rest. Awesome. So we're gonna finish off with a little bit of a diagonal bridge. And for this one, right before we do it, I would like to do a shin box real quick. Yes, it's an assessment. We're reassessing from earlier. I want both knees stacked, both ankles stacked. Let the bottom knee sneak forward. See where you can comfortably sit. That's a big difference for me right now. Good. And then switch to the other side. Feel what that side felt like compared to last time. And now let's see what this side feels like compared to last time. Same thing, this is our left shin box. We finished off with this one last time too. So just kind of, hopefully you feel a little looser. So now let's do a quick diagonal bridge, and then we're gonna do another shin box, because the diagonal bridge to me almost always does magic on hip mobility. And so we're not even gonna move our hips this time. We're just gonna do one holding set. So I want you to stack your knees up, stick your butt out like it's a beast butt, and then push your elbow into the ground as you push your ribs and chest away from the elbow. And now drive your hips forward and low. We don't wanna go up. We always wanna stay low and drive the energy through our ribs into our hip bones as our knees bend and reach our kneecaps towards the floor. And actually away from that wall. Good. And keep connecting those upper abs into your hip bones. Feel that connection, pushing the elbow for all the height you can get out of it while that bottom hip drives forward. You should feel that bottom butt cheek really driving your energy of your hips forward, but anchoring through the abs. Your other arm should not be on the ground. That twists your body. And now let's go ahead and bend your knees, push away from your elbow as you kind of stick your butt out behind you. All right, so let's quickly do the other side because I think I'm running out of time. And I want you to bend both knees, hand flat in front of you. Push away from the elbow with your chest and abs, making sure there's no rotation in your body. And now drive your hips forward and up, reaching the bent knees down through your hips, reaching your ribs, or anchoring your ribs down into your hip bones as you keep pushing that bottom hip forward and both hips equally forward, but really driving and feeling how the bottom butt cheek is working harder than the top one right now. Good. If your neck gets tense, you can look down, you can look up, and then find the center again. That sometimes helps. And now push out of your elbow as you stick your butt back and out. And let's go ahead and do one more of those shin boxes. So we're going to start facing the same way we've done for all of them. So let's go ahead and bring your bottom leg forward, top leg back. Feel, wow, it was already feeling a little bit better for me, but now it feels nice to be in this position instead of just better. So let's go ahead and swing to the other side. Stack your knees, stack your hips. Slide the bottom one forward, find your sits bones, or just find where you can comfortably get to with your lean. And hopefully you've got more movement now than you started with, and you see that what starts achy, what starts tight, can work into being something beautiful that makes you feel charged up and ready to go for your day. So thanks for spending your Friday with me. I will see you next week. All right, have a great day, everybody. Bye.